Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Riffing with G podcast. I am G, your eponymous host. This podcast is where we discuss musicianship and theory and songcraft with the leading lights of the alternative music scene in Australia. Today, my guest needs very little introduction, of course. Lead singer for Full Scale in all of its incarnations, Mammal, Super Heist, Ox and the Fury, The Nerve. What else did I miss? Overreactor. Can't forget Overreactor. Mr. Ezekiel Ox. Hey, Zeke, how are you, mate?
Yeah, g'day, Glenn. Thanks so much for having me on this wonderful venture that you've got going. I'm looking forward to it.
It's so hard to keep all those bands straight in my head. You've done.
Yeah, I can imagine what it's like being in them all. No, I've been very lucky throughout my career to be able to play with lots of different musicians, lots of different players, and to be able to enjoy all the different vibrations that those bands take in, whilst they also have a certain aesthetic. So I like it. The older I get, the more comfortable I become with my multi-platform career.
I will put a bit of a fork in that because I do want to talk about like the writing process and how it kind of is different between your different guys. But I thought I might just backtrack and do a little bit of the history so we can kind of get a bit of a sense of continuity. Now, I don't know whether you're aware, but I went back in the Wayback Archive on the internet and I found an archived post from Whopper back in 2000 about their graduates, of 2000. I think you were listed on that.
But what was the name, Glenn? What name was I under?
I didn't recognize the name. Alan James Davies. I love it. I remember the first time we met was when you were in Brisbane doing the Mamma Mia show. And I remember you invited us to the awards show that they have at the end of every musical. I wasn't aware that this is a thing, but they presented you the Alan James Davies Memorial Award, I believe.
Well, the reason for that was because in 1998, in August, I joined Full Scale Deflection, which didn't have a name at the time. I saw a flyer up with the tear strips, and it said, "Do you like Faith No More, Rage Against the Machine, and Limp Bizkit?" And I looked at it and I went, "Who the hell's Limp Bizkit?" Right? That was where I was at with my musical journey.
Yeah.
But I definitely like Faith No More and Rage. So I walked into this Scarborough Beach rehearsal room, and then after we'd been in the band for a while, we started wanting to play some gigs. And I'd always planned on changing my name for rock and roll. So going through a process with Jimmy T and Chris and Nick and Forrester, who were in the band at the time, I was named Ezekiel the Ox to start. At the start, I was the definite article, which was that evolved into Ezekiel Ox. So that was 98, and the end of Mamma Mia was 2002. So over those 4 years, I'd managed to get a bit of a foothold in the Melbourne industry and the Perth industry, and I'd made the decision that I was changing my name at the end of Mamma Mia, and I'd made everyone aware of that. So they were giving me the Memorial Award. Memorial meaning someone has died. Alan James Davies, I guess he died that night. I don't know if I have this annoying aunt who refuses to acknowledge my name, and she always sends my Christmas card and my birthday card with this very pointed Alan on it. So she's pretty much the only holdout, though. So I don't know if Alan's quite dead. I think there's a little bit. Alan lives on in my heart, But yeah, that's how that award happened. I remember those times, though. I remember some times in the hotel rooms, and I remember I was super keen to meet you guys because I'd been so impressed by that debut EP, and it was, and I just felt like, well, if I'm going to be in Brisbane, I may as well try to get to know this band.
That's interesting because I remember you telling us in one of those times. I don't know whether it was just during that time in Brisbane or later on, but you said you'd heard The Cell on Triple J and you expected it to break out into some kind of like full metal vocals or rappy vocals or whatever, and then when Clint came in with his his little angel voice,
histrionics.
Yeah,
I think it's fair to describe Clint as histrionic. I think both of us, but yeah, with Clint's histrionics, which we all love.
And that was you were like, this is a really different kind of music. than what I'd heard before.
I think it was sort of pushing away from the Head PE Test Eagles Seven Dust. I mean, it was probably closer to Seven Dust, but I guess in a way, Clint kind of popped up the Deftones a bit. So it had that the melodies were not quite as underground and foreboding, but there was still that element there, and I thought it was. I mean, it was fresh. I mean, there's no doubt that. I mean, for many people that I talk to, when the Butterfly Effect comes up, people often ask me what you guys are like, you know, because they know that I know you, things like that. I always say that to me, the EP and that first album were really good for Australia because they gave everyone a sense that we could you could really add that songwriting layer to that alternative new metal sound that would take it to another place. So it was very I mean, it was an amazing time, wasn't it? You got, you know, Cog, Butters, Carnival, Ochre, Melodicy, Full Scale. There was MM9 was still around in different points. There was just, you know, then you had everything else that was going on with Heavyweight Champ over in Perth. Pendulum were just starting to bring that heavy metal aspect. So that all those bands were in ways of community and friendship were connected and were touring together. And it was it was our salad days, wasn't it? We were young men. It was a very exciting time.
There was a lot of really great times where we would all hang out. And there's a few anecdotes that I wanted to bring up, but certainly I remember you being there and steering some of the conversations that we had collectively about where we were. And I think you had a much clearer idea. I don't figure that Kurt's, he's very clear with what he wants, but he doesn't ever over intellectualize what he wants, I think, sometimes. And so then to have you come in and sort of analyze it from an outside perspective was always really interesting. I remember because you were there, I think, when we were listening to the demos. We played a show in Melbourne. I can't remember which one it was. I think maybe we were supporting someone. Maybe it was one of those Rock Against Drugs concerts or whatever that we were on. But we went up to that hotel in just off, was it Queens Road in St Kilda? That we were staying, or on the way down to St Kilda, we were staying in a high rise there, and we had the final desk mixes for Begins Here before we went into. I remember a computer keyboard going flying over the balcony, if I remember. That was, I don't know why that comes to mind, but and I remember you being there and coming in and like offering some opinions about what was working and what wasn't working, and it was interesting because we were going into the studio like 2 days later to do all the fix-ups and all the other things that weren't quite there yet. And it was so. Oh, you did some you did some backing vocals on a track.
I came into the studio. I didn't end up on the album. There was Flynn's cut went on. I mean, I noticed that Modern Music are doing their diaries at the moment, and Dave's being quite forthcoming and honest, and that's great. You know, that's obviously, I mean, you don't want to read something. So I guess it's open to that. I remember getting a very, very clear sense that Clint was interested in having my take on it, or having me in the studio. But I remember going into the session and feeling like it was a bit of a hassle for Dave. I don't think Dave wanted me to be on it. So I felt like I put my piece down, but then I kind of knew as I left that the producer was not going to let it onto the album. So if anyone out there is listening to this, there are secret Ezekiel Ox vocals for Without Wings, because Flynn was on Perception. Is that what it's called? Without Wings?
Yeah, Without Wings. Yeah, Flynn's on Perception.
There are secret, somewhere on a hard drive, I imagine, at Modern Music, there are secret Zeke vocals for Begins Here, which go with the fact that I actually do vocals on Rockafor on Carnival's Themata. So it would have been nice to have the double.
It would have been. Now you've got me interested. I'm now distracted from our conversation because I have the multi-track masters on a hard drive here. I'm like, should I? Maybe I won't. Maybe it's distracting to the flow.
Well, I think also we could look at that's something for people to think about. I think if there's a groundswell of people wanting to hear that, but I mean, look, Begins. I think all I'll say is that I think Dave got the album right.
Yeah,
and I don't think that the album missed my vocals, and I I remember the time being very creative. I remember the time being very, I mean, you're young, and I just remember it being a really, like you said, like we were getting together, we were talking about what we were doing, and I think we all felt like we were on the right path. And I remember being feeling very much a part of something, which was a little bit something existential, almost something outside of myself.
Somebody made a snarky comment under one of Dave's posts about, as if it was hardly a scene, mate, or something like that. I don't know. We don't read the internet, right? But I was like, "You motherfucker, you weren't there. It was definitely a scene. There was definitely like that camaraderie, and that's part of the reason we wanted to do this, because we were always like ships in the night, always constantly going, we'll see each other backstage. Yeah, man, how you going? Yeah, good to see you. How's things? How's the family? Great. Anyway, bye. And you never really, or it's party time, woo, afterwards. And you don't really want to get down to, you're sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning and you want to go, so Zeke, I just wanted to sit down and talk to you about your process. I don't know, how do you feel? Like, hey, it's not the time for it. Not the time for it.
I don't think there's any doubt, as far as that, going back to that scene comment.
Yeah.
As far as, I don't think, if you look at what happened, which was that Full Scale evolved into Mammal, which played with the butterfly effect, played with Cog, played with Carnival.
Yeah.
Full Scale had already, so Mammal I'm talking about, right? Did that. Full Scale did that too. The butterfly effect and Carnival and all that stuff was happening, but also you had Melodicy and Ochre evolving into Dead Letter Circus, who would go on to play with all those bands. Mammal were giving Dead Letter Circus some of their first gigs, as with the butterfly effect. Yep. I don't think it's I really don't think it's up for debate that it was a scene. Yeah. That we were slowly figuring out where the chips were going to lie, as to how it was going to end up, and everyone had their piece in that. So whoever that person was, you're wrong.
Yeah, totally. So going back in your journey, so you moved from, your first foray was, you weren't really into rock. Well, you not being into rock music, but you didn't really perform rock music to begin with. Where was your entry point into music? Do you have some early memories that were of like an influential time?
Well, the story goes that when my parents would put on vinyl, before I could walk, I would pull myself up and I would dance. And then from there, so I always responded to music and wanted to be a part of it. And so when I was 14, I saved my money and I bought a guitar at the same time as I was already playing lead roles in musicals. So I was developing my voice, I was developing my movement, but I wanted to have the guitar as a songwriting tool. I made that decision very early, which was, you don't necessarily have to play it live, but it's really nice to be able to have something that's mobile that you can sit down with and you can forge your own path with. So from 14, I started in bands from around 16, which was my high school band called Doozy. And then that was 16 was 96.
Yep.
And then by 98, I was in Full Scale Deflection.
Yeah.
So really, there was a parallel thing going on. So whilst I was training at university to become this musical theatre performer, which we ended up meeting while I was doing Mamma Mia, I was also involved in playing gigs with my sort of incendiary post-industrial hardcore band, and we were doing very well, and I was enjoying it. So I actually feel like I'm a performer. Yeah. I'm a singer. I'm a dancer. I'm a poet, and I've always been those things. And I always saw all those things were very useful to have, as far as both musical theatre, acting, film, television. I've done all those things, and I continue to do those things. So for me, it's always been about being on stage. My nana said, when I was about 7, she said to my parents, that kid's got more front than Myers. And so to go on and become a front man, I think is very appropriate. And I always wanted to be the center of attention. I always wanted to be on stage performing. And I always loved the idea of being in a band, but I also like acoustic stuff. And so I feel like my calling was to be a performer. Yeah. And then my mission was to develop the skills of being able to sing, dance, act, correlate poetry into something that can be performed. All those elements, I think, became more like what I had to do to be able to facilitate being on stage, which I find is where I'm at home more than anywhere else. I feel more comfortable on stage I feel most comfortable in my life when I'm on stage.
Yeah.
It all decreases from there. My anxieties and my depression and everything comes wherever they are. But when I'm on stage, or when I'm umpiring a game of football, because everything's in that moment. And I just love that sort of, that feeling it gives you.
I feel like they're both scenarios where there's quite clearly defined relationships going on as well there. So, and they're almost similar in their own way, I guess, because you're commanding the energy of the space. So you're, as a singer, you've got the audience's attention, and you're collaborating with the people on the stage, but maybe they're like I don't know much about umpiring, but I assume you have a cohort of umpires that also umpire with you. So maybe they're kind of like your bandmates. And if you're the lead umpire, you're kind of the lead singer.
There is no lead umpire. The field umpires, which I am, there's 3 of them, and you work as a team. You have seniority, I guess. But I think that the similarity is that the umpiring is different because it's binary. It's in, it's out, it's a free kick or it's not. Whereas the performance is art. There's a big difference between sport and art. But I definitely love the part that makes you central, that makes you in the middle of it. So you can have a great bass performance going on, but if the front man's doing their job, then maybe people won't notice that aren't musical. Yeah. And that's fine. No offense, Glenn.
No,
but and it's the same with umpiring in a way, like willing to take control when you can. But yeah, so basically, I guess my musical journey, though, to answer the question, was something that was very much pathological.
Yep.
And I then used my love of music to harness that love of being. Because what it really is about, it's about being able to tell people a very specific story or a very broad story, and hopefully bring a group of people that are all different together in a moment. Say, hey, look at us, we're all human, and we all agree tonight that this beat's rocking, that lyric's good fun. We're all, and if anyone that's seen me perform knows that I want everyone singing along together. I want that sense of unity and community that comes. So that feeds into both football and activism. You see, because when you're on the street and you're chanting "Free the Refugees," or when you've got 36 players and we're all doing it together, that's a community. So really, my mission in life is to get humans together to do fun stuff, cool stuff, stretch your body, use your voice, run around, have some rules, have some fun within those rules is the idea. Because I'm not a hippie, I do believe we need rules, and I do believe that, that's the way it should be. So that's where my musical journey started. It was actually I believe a tack on to wanting to be a leader, wanting to lead different communities.
And I can see that sort of spills into the idea that you would play with different sort of artists. Because I was going to ask you whether your ear was more drawn to the sounds of musicals, which are very strongly diatonic and kind of move in predictable ways, and then to alternative rock, which is often dissonant, darker. But then you sort of answer that question by saying that it's not really about the sound per se; it's more about the energy or where bringing people together. So it doesn't.
Well, it's also it also. You mentioned Kurt before. Kurt's someone who strikes me as an example, as someone who has a very clear vision of what they want. See, my vision is later. So I'm like, I want the crowd to unify. I want everyone to sing together, and I want to feel connected to my community. And music is a big, wonderful, joyous part of that. So what I love is going into the studio and going, hey, I wonder what we'll make together. I wonder what this will sound like. I wonder what the nerve will end up sounding like. I wonder what, and of course I'm very active in those processes in talking about what I want. But I'm also not particularly, I'm not particularly, I have no interest in control. And I actually think that the best results come when it comes to rock and roll and punk rock, when chaos is allowed to reign. So I love chaos. I love just trying everything, experimenting, and then seeing what you like most. So yeah, that's another part of it.
Seeing what evolves. So
well, what happens. You know, see what happens.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned getting people to sing along and that sort of stuff. Now, is there something of an intentional process in the craft when you're sitting in the studio, and do you have like a little bag of tricks in your head that you might go through, or is it just kind of more instinctual?
Actually changed. So my first songs that I wrote were me sitting on a guitar writing something that was probably in line with Paul Kelly and Bob Dylan and Rob Thomas. So writing songs that have either, you know, A-B cycles that go for 7 or 8 times, which is quite common in Bob Dylan songs, or they have A-B, A-B, C-B cycles, which is a very Irving Berlin kind of, you know, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus.
Yep.
So I was writing stuff like that. Full scale, I would write lyrics that I thought would unify people and that I thought would get them singing along. Then I might even come up with a bit of a beatbox idea, like Party Political is probably the best example, where I actually said to the guys I wanted to go dot 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 dot, and then I want the vocal to do this, and then the rest I just want you guys to write.
Yeah.
So that was me up until Full Scale ended. The first time, I should say, when I first broke Full Scale up in 2005.
Yeah.
And I joined, I didn't join. I formed Mammal with Pete and Nick, and then we found Zane and formed it properly. Then once I started with Mammal, I actually wanted to change my process, and I started going into the studio with full production in my ears, pretty much demo production, drums, bass, and guitar, and then I would freestyle sounds. And in some cases, like a song like Think, I freestyled the entire verses. Just that, what you're hearing on the tape is the first go, and I started to, because I'd spent the time from 2003 to 2005 practicing my freestyling skills. It was actually something that I worked very hard on with hip hop people.
Yeah.
So I'm conceptualizing and understanding the process it takes to be a good freestyler. And then now some of it comes out as full verses and some of it comes out as like, and then we'll take that, we'll edit it, we'll put it in, and then I'll go, okay, I need to write a chorus for that. And then it becomes like a massive, big crossword puzzle where the clue is the phonetics of the noise, the clue is the rhythm, and the clue is maybe a word. So I might go, floor. And you go, I think I just said floor there. What about if we go get on the floor, and then you've got, okay, then you start locking different parts in. And then so it's like a word puzzle, a Sudoku with words.
Yeah, totally.
And then until you find what's correct. That is the way that I then started working in all of my rock and roll material. I prefer that now because I believe that it's more visceral and it brings a certain immediacy to the process that I think people feel when they listen to it. I think they go, wow, this is happening right now. The solo acoustic stuff, not so much. I sit down, I get a basic idea of a melody, maybe, but I also can just write lyrics and then bend the melody to their will.
Yeah.
So I'm actually more than happy to use many different processes. I'm also happy to learn a melody that you bring to me and write lyrics for it, or I'm also happy to sing your lyrics and make up a melody. So really, for me, and I know this is something you're going to hear more and more of from people that are accomplished songwriters, whatever works. Yeah, and that is the only piece of advice that I would give. And you know what? If one thing and one thing only works for you, then that's what works and that's whatever works. So stick with that. But in my case, I love the exploratory process too much. And I'm also trained. So I have 3 years of full-time process that I've learned, which informs the way I work. Whereas someone who's picked up a tambourine and wanted to sing in a band when they were 20 is obviously going to approach things very differently. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that they're going to produce something any less quality.
Totally. Well, I think that having that toolkit it just takes some of the pressure off. You don't have to be so inspired all the time necessarily, because inspiration will come and go. But if you can sit and you know a little bit about theory, or you know a little bit about how words work, or you spent some time doing poetry, or you spent some time doing freestyling, then you can find the tool for the job. You go, all right, okay, I need this thing here. I'll try this thing here. I'll try that thing there. I remember Sia mentioned that. Yeah.
Sorry, Sia mentioned, but I'll get back to Sia. But there's also the factor that once you have those skills that you've learned at uni about how to analyze poetry or how to analyze a melody and some of the music skills around how chord progressions work, you can use those when you are under the pump. Because yes, creativity comes in waves, but when you sign to Columbia Records, like I was at 23, and they're knocking on your door going, we want the record, you need to be able to put things in place where where you can keep doing the work. So I love it when I get to sit around and smoke 5 joints and then get half a verse. That's fantastic fun. But that's not every day. Sometimes you've just got to get it done.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were saying about Sia before
she said that she has, and this is more about the melody writing, but she gets sent stuff to Top Line on, and she won't listen to it until she has it up in a session. Then she hits record, and for the first time that she listens to it is when she's recording herself, scatting along to it, doing that process that you mentioned, and it seems to be, I find the same thing. Like my process ends up being sometimes focused around going for long walks. I find that being on a walk somehow disengages a bit of that left brain and can enable a bit more of the right brain to come through. And as when I have 2 phones, and one has got the track on it and one has got like the voice recorder on it, and I put it on, and the first time, amount of times that I've started listening to the track and going, subi shubi dibby doo da ba ba dibba da ba, and they're going, oh fuck, I should record that, and then I hit record on my voice recorder, and then I go play it back, and then I go, shubi.
It's not the same.
Shubi,
it's not the same.
Yeah. It's that.
No, 100%. You need to you're in a way it's all coming in from the ether anyway.
It is,
and you need to always be recording, but it's hard. It's impossible. I've definitely had stuff where I've felt it. You can literally feel it slipping through your fucking proverbial fingers. It's unbelievable.
The universe comes
horrible.
in.
It's a horrible feeling, can I say? It's a horrible feeling.
Because the universe comes in with great vigor, and you're like, oh, it's here. And then it just goes, oh no, there it goes.
But it makes sense. It makes sense that our puny human form can sometimes get stuck in between being able to express the will of that creative ether. It's important not to get too down on yourself at that point. We are only human after all.
It's true. So you got a bit of theory at school, I imagine?
Yeah. Keyboard. Obviously, I can read music. I understand basic things around how chords work and cycle of fifths and the way melodies can work. So how an accidental works.
Yep.
And then music being abstract, I can then decide how I think it influences my song. Yeah. But also poetry. So we did 3 years of poetry, Shakespeare, and then you also do not just reading it and learning about how it's structured, but how it feels in your mouth.
Okay.
How it all those things that are helpful. And then being creative. I mean, I think if you immerse 17 to 20-year-old people into poetry, dance, music, performance, it's natural that what happens is it all goes in, and then somehow it comes out in a new format because we're all individuals. And I was at uni with people like Matthew Robinson, Eddie Perfect, Tim McCallum, Kelly Road. I mean, some of the greatest and most well-known musical theatre performers of their generation. And they've all come out with their own unique spin on what was actually the same course, which is quite interesting.
Did you find yourself having, across the different bands, did you find it was a group effort, or did you always have like a significant other with the energy in the writing process?
It's an interesting question.
I'll
buy myself some time like a politician before I answer by saying that, well, like the politician that I am, and I'll by saying that one thing I've always done is I've always said credit where credit is due.
Yep.
So lyrics by Ezekiel Ox is often the case. Music by Full Scale or music by Mammal. But when it came to paying bands, so 4-piece bands like Mammal and Full Scale and The Nerve and Overreactor, everything I do is split 4 ways holistically. And that includes songwriting. Now, the money, but not the credit. So in a band because a lot of the thing about rock bands is how important is a drummer to a rock band, right?
Yeah.
But often the drummer doesn't write. but that doesn't mean that they're not a part of why you're successful. You know, like if Mammal tried to replace Zane, like, is that a good idea? No, because Zane is such an important part of Mammal's aggression, ferocity, aesthetic, intensity. Like they're all things that I'd say aggressive, you know, intense. They're all things you describe as drawing. So as an example, so I try to incentivize the less writing prone artists to keep the thing together. As far as having secondary people, I think it's probably fair to say yes. Jimmy T for Full Scale, Pete and I from Mammal have always been incredibly good at whipping shit into shape really quickly, and just being inspired and working with each other. In the Nerve, I was working with me and Glenn Proudfoot wrote the songs. In Overreactor, obviously Corey just couldn't do it without him. And then, you know, the Ox and the Fury is more me, and I sort of dictate. The solo band, the material that I've had so far with the Ezekiel Ox EOX project is very much up until this point has been Stephen Smith, and I've now translated that process to New South Wales by taking on working in partnership with David Blues from Blues Studios. So it's important for me also, I've got to be straight up, to have an engineer. So I can sit at home with my computer and do some basic stuff. Like I can record a vocal, but when it comes to mixing and even just if I want to be able to work fast enough to write a song quickly, can you double that verse? Can you make that chorus half as long? And then I'm going to go into the verse with just the guitar, and then we're going to kick out in the chorus. Can you do that? You know, so that we can hear it. And then I need someone in front of me who can quickly go, cut, 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 cut. Do you mean something like this? And I can go, yes, but make that bit half as long again. And then we can move on quickly. So I'm not able to drive Logic, Reason, Reaper, Pro Tools at a level that would facilitate the speed so that we don't end up losing grip of the universe, as we spoke about before. So those partnerships are incredibly important, or at least I should say, wherever it's coming from, support and collaboration are key to my career, and also key to the pleasure that I take out of working. I want to work with other people. I want to hear their ideas, and I want to be around others when I'm working. I love it. I love bouncing off people. And so I'm not Trent Reznor. I don't want to lock myself in a bedroom and make an album. You know? No,
that's true. And I guess that helps get out of that thing we're talking about getting out of the way as well. You can sort of, when you've got many hands working on a thing and they're experts at their thing and doing their thing, you can just enable that flow a lot better. You don't then have to be worried about technical issues.
It's also important to remember, do what, you know, be able to be hard enough on yourself to know what you're not good at. Don't be one of those people turning up to the Australian Idol audition, you know, that can't sing on a maybe smaller level. And if you want to have a big rock band, well, you're going to need a guitar hero. I can play guitar, but as I said, it's a songwriting tool. I need Pete Williamson. I need Glenn Proudfoot. I need Dave Blues. You know, so Jimmy T is a great example of an absolute guitar hero. Jimmy's not a technically proficient guitar player, but he's probably my favorite guitar player of all time. You need those people that are, like it's like that old thing. Never be the smartest person in the room. So if I'm the best guitar player in the room, then I'd like to find someone who's better, because it just builds everything. You know.
Did you have much of a relationship? Did Rob Kay do much writing?
Full Scale was incredibly collaborative. Crudy wrote the famous riff at the start of Empty Texas. Crudy would often come with drum licks and riffs that would go with them. Jimmy T was always that. What I meant by that collaborator, Jimmy T was very much who I felt the connection with. And also because we were in Full Scale Deflection and then Full Scale, and then Jimmy's the one that's always been there. And I think if you break it down, Full Scale is a very riff-driven band, a very guitar-driven band. It's not, whereas Mammal is a more rhythm section, funk-driven band, and you know, the Nerve goes back to being a guitar-driven band. So you just, and that's once again, that's not something we decided. That's just something that sort of happened, you know.
Well, I think certainly with our arrangement, it's definitely Kurt's band and it's Kurt's vision. And he just kind of needs us as his limbs to do the things that he can't do or doesn't want to spend the time getting good enough to do at the level that he expects of it. And so, I mean, I'm definitely glad that it was always the songwriting and everything was split 4 ways in our band as well, because, you know, but that was the thing. We all really contributed in our own very own way. And even if that was song to song, I mean, I honestly believe that the songs couldn't be what they were without all 4 members doing their specific thing and bringing their different take to it. But even if it's just something like Benny being the one that can stand in the middle of us all and manage the communication chain, you know, like, because definitely, especially when you've been on the road for a long time or been playing in a band with someone for a while, the tendency to try and get a bit annoyed or get a bit angry at each other can definitely come up, the whole band of brothers thing. And being able to sometimes have Ben in the middle, just coordinating that and almost like sending Kurt and Clint to their corners a little bit and then going, I'll talk to both of you and I'll get you. I know you both want the same thing, so let's just. But
that's politics, isn't it? That's someone who can manage the internal politics and issues of what is a very difficult time at sometimes. And you know, and I think it's to younger bands out there, when you've done the hard touring, just make sure. Mammal is a great example of a band that should have taken a break. You know, we worked so hard, and everyone knows that. I mean, if you didn't see us playing at a festival or at a gig, you weren't even interested in rock and roll for that period. We were everywhere, and in the end, we had this fanatical work ethic, but we should have stopped. We should have just had a break and taken 3 months off and not seen each other. Me and Corey took 7 months off for no reason. We just didn't call each other for 7 months in the middle of an album cycle. And then one day I called him up and he's like, "Hey man, how you been?" And it felt like nothing had changed, but that Overreactor has been incredibly easy and incredibly successful. The musical output's been great, but we've never once argued. And it's because we know sometimes just fuck it, just don't hang out.
There's been discussion subsequently to our reformation that perhaps that would have been probably a good thing, rather than just kind of going through all the palaver that we went through. It's just
100%, 100%.
For a couple of years, find it.
But hindsight gives you 20/20. So
yeah, totally.
You
know. A couple of the things that I wanted to touch on, the sort of sides of the same coin. One is like getting an idea across the line with a band member or 3 band members that don't like your idea but you're sold on. And the flip side to that is when somebody else brings in something that they're sold on and you think it really has no legs whatsoever, like strategies you might use to get through those times.
I'd probably just quit the band, Glenn. Yeah. That's my history. I'd probably just get some petrol and just pour it on it and then just get a match and go, all right, if you don't want that bass lick in, I'm out. I'm going to go start a new band. That's have you ever heard the saying "truth in all jest"? No, but I think that, I mean, I just think you need to come into any process with the idea that everything you're involved in is subjective. Yeah. And you are going to struggle. I'm actually very good at looking at something in its whole, in its entirety. So I will often have moments on records that are in some cases 20 years old. On November 11, just gone, was the 20th anniversary, 2020, of the release of Full Scale Deflection, Symptoms of Chaos. My first album is now 20 years old, and which isn't bad for 40, you know, 26 releases later. And I think that there's still parts of that record that I listen to and think, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember not getting my way on that. But what I see it as is an incredible album that I see as a whole. Every album, every release, every EP has something on it that I go, oh yeah, I remember arguing about that shaker, and maybe it's there now or maybe it's not. But I remember my position. And in many ways, I joke about it. I still say to people when I'm listening to it, "You hear that?" I said, I never wanted that on there. But the thing is, I mean, you're talking about why are you doing it? What are you doing it for? My reason for getting an album out was to give people something to sing along to so they could come into a gig and feel connected. That's why my lyrics are about connectivity. That's why my lyrics are about being together. They're not about alienation. They're not about the thing that, in the rock and roll sense, the thing that hurt me. They're about the thing that's going to make us all better, that's going to make us all feel better. So for me, no, I don't have a problem with that. I often go to the vote, and because of my experience with politics, if you want to be involved in politics, you're going to lose and you're going to win, and you're probably going to lose a lot more than you win. So I see the whole as greater, and that may come as a surprise to people who there seems to be a very spurious rumor around that I am, because of the nature of my career, which is that I like having lots of different bands, that I am in some ways difficult to work with. And I would stand by my record, and I would stand by what's been said about me by people I have worked with. When it comes to making music, when it comes to making the decisions required to be in a band, when it comes to turning up to rehearsals on time and being at the gig and giving 110%, I like to think that I behave in a way that keeps things moving forward. And that's an important part of it. You know, if something is so overwhelmingly right, everyone will agree. And that's just a fact. And if something is so overwhelmingly shit, vice versa. Yeah. We've all had those moments, haven't we? Yeah. Where you go, oh, what was that? That's not going in. Yeah. Or you go, that, yes, that, keep that, you know?
So I reckon if we just move that up a time and do that, we'll try that. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Oh, yeah, no, sorry about that, boys.
But it is important to try everything. That's one thing. That's just so you know, that's one rule I have. Because what I'll say is, separate to how I deal with things, which is water off a duck's back if you don't get your way, because you should have a producer and other band members around you that you can trust enough to be able to produce something that's still, you're happy to put your name on. But when someone says, hey man, I want to try a piano on that bit instead of a guitar, and I think in my head, that just sounds like the worst idea. This is going to sound awful. Yeah. It is your responsibility, I believe, to still, yes, okay, we will try it. Try everything, because I'll tell you right now, the amount of times that I've been surprised pleasantly, or I've had my first feeling ratified, conclusively, which is that it wasn't going to work, probably a toss of a coin. It's probably 50-50. So you'll find often that you end up going, actually, that means you've got the right people. You've got someone that works with you and someone that you want to listen to. Because if you're not interested in listening to the people that you've got around you, then don't have them around you. Yeah. Because if you think you can do it yourself, fine. And if you don't want to listen to them, you just want to tell a great bass player what to do, well, then you better be paying them. And then you can say, mate, just shut up and play your bass. And I've done that as well. Yeah. I've done that. This is what I need, and I'm not interested in your opinion. You're just a vessel for my vision. Yeah. But just be really clear up front and honest about what you want. Yeah. And if you're in a collaborative process, well, then don't be a dick and listen to others, because you will actually be proven wrong as many times as you're proven right if you're willing to let your ego, just park your ego for a bit.
I was doing a session one time, and I felt like the guy that had engaged my services kind of wanted my experience and wanted my take on things. Also had a fairly clear idea. The songs were pretty much written, but the onus was like, come into the studio, I want to hear you do your thing, and then getting in there and having them go, no, that's wrong. Do it like this. Do it like this. And of course, they're the ones. It's their vision, and I don't have a problem with. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you said at the start. We're in the red light's on now, and this is what you want. So this is cool. But that can be it was quite a frustrating process to sort of say, well, did you want the experience, or did you want to just tell me how to do it? You have to make a decision one way or the other.
Yeah. Having said that, though, I mean, I think it's best if you always say we're going to start collaborative, because then it's up to each person to work. But I'll give you an example. When Overreactor was lucky enough to have, I believe, Australia's, well, it's a top 3 thing. You've got Angus Young, Ian Moss, and Chris Cheney, right? I was lucky enough to have Chris Cheney come into the studio to record on a track called Something More on Overreactor's debut album. And Chris is just a lovely bloke. But when he came in, we said, oh, you do what you do. You're Chris Cheney. But you know what? What he was doing, we we had to have this awkward conversation. We had to like excuse ourselves and go, we've got Chris Cheney in the studio and we don't think this is working. And it felt like, how do you say to possibly Australia's greatest guitar player, and I mean, look at the songs the guy's written, you know, and speaking of songwriting, how do you say it? And of course we just walked in and said, oh, could we try it like this? And Chris of course did it, and it sounded the way we hoped it would. But then once he'd gotten into what we wanted, he then started to flex his muscles a little bit more, and it became something that was both. So in those situations, it's very important not to be intimidated with, oh my God, I've got Glenn from the Butterfly Effect playing bass on my track, which could be very intimidating to certain musicians. It's very important to, first of all, respect that experience, respect that knowledge, but also be willing to go, yeah, but really when it comes to what I'm doing, it's not relevant here because I want this. And for instance, if I had a bass track I needed done and I got you into the studio, it may just be purely because technically you are able, in your case or Chris Cheney's case, to do something that no one else can. Or you may be able to do something technically that we need for the track that 10 players could do in that case, and you were available. So I think it's really important, but you know what I mean? Like, these are practical, pragmatic realities about the process and the craft of how you get to a point where a song's finished. They're not, and in the end, man, it's not magic. A lot of it is just plugging away, plugging holes, putting your finger in the dike there, and then finding a new hole, patching it all up until you go, yeah, that's how I wanted it. I don't know, maybe you can reflect on this. Have you, how many times have you finished producing something and you think, then you listen to it and you're like, yeah, I really like that, but it sounds nothing like what you expected it to when you started?
Oh, all the time. Like it's you know, like I'm even just working on something at the moment that the working title is, I've had it Game of Things, because it kind of felt like a cross between the Game of Thrones theme and the Stranger Things theme. It was this kind of synth heavy part, and I've just suddenly realized today that it needs to be a Bring Me the Horizon drop C, you know, metal tune, and I've been barking up the wrong tree the entire time. And you know, have this piece of music. I had a clear idea about this piece of music for 5 years, and suddenly it's apparent that it's not what it's been masquerading as up to this point. It's sort of just been hovering there, but now it's like it's come time to be born. And
how good is that? How good is the process? Because you honor and you trust the process, and the process leads you to your epiphany, which is this is what the song is supposed to be. Sometimes the process goes very smoothly. You get to the end, and you go, yeah, that sounds exactly how I imagined and exactly how I wanted. Other times you end up in Katoomba when you were heading for Brisbane. You know,
but I like also. I think you touched on this a little bit as well. I like ending up in a place that I didn't even intend to, because music for me can be satisfying in so many different forms, and there's something about. I'd like to pin down what the actual element is, but I can enjoy an acoustic track or a heavy track or a dance track, because it's or writing those type of tracks, because there's that moment of where everything sort of turns on a dime, and it wasn't something, and then suddenly it is something, and it can end up any place, and that's okay, because now suddenly you're on this ride that you didn't expect, and you're making a piece of music that you didn't even really set out to make, and you're like, I wonder where this is going to be next. You know, you just sort of, and people keep having ideas, and you just keep going and go, all right, yeah, this is, and you end up, you've written a country track, or you've written, you know, something at the end of it that you just totally didn't intend to. And it's about being swept up in that energy, about being swept up on that, riding that wave and just going, I don't know where we're going, but let's go. You know?
Yeah. And the thing is, you don't really, know not only how different individuals will influence a process if you are collaborating, but how we all know the couple that we all know where they're both just fantastic people.
Yeah.
But their relationship makes them both toxic, right?
Yeah.
Like that, you know, everyone looks at them and go, how can those two awesome people act like such painful assholes when they're together, right? And they need to be apart. Those sorts of things can also go the other way, which is how do different fusions that are positive. There is no way of telling what this artist and that artist together will achieve until it happens. And that's the beauty, like I said before, about if you think you're in control, then that's great, but you're not. And that's just something I believe. People can argue that point. People may think, no, I think Trent Reznor's in control, or there's artists that have had controlling attitudes towards their music. But really, like Eminem, right? Great rapper, strikes me as the kind of guy who's in control of his career.
Yeah.
But where would he be without Dre?
Yeah.
Right? Nowhere. And so there's something that happened when those two got together that created incendiary music. And the part of the joy of being an artist is what's next. Like the next, like I didn't even know I'd be in a band with Dave Blues until this year, because geography and circumstance thrust us together, and it's just been an absolute blessing, So it's those sorts of things can happen, and you can also be very successful with people over a period, and then it can turn into something that's not handy and not good anymore. And that it's very important to make sure you're aware of those things. So you really, it's really just about finding where you're heading in your path. Because I don't know. I don't know if I've ever met anyone. I've met a lot of people who think they're in control, but I don't know if I've ever met anyone who is. That's what I'm saying.
That's a great way to put it. You mentioned collaboration. I wanted to know if there was anybody that you had in mind that you've always wanted to collaborate with, or that you haven't. Yeah.
I mean, they're pipe dreams.
Yeah.
A lot of them, as far as it goes. But I've always, I would love to make a record with Tom Morello.
Yep.
He's by far such a massive influence on me. And I know he's made records with other vocalists.
Yep.
So I think we're listening to Street Sweeper Social Club with Boots, and I know that would be great. I'd love, you mentioned her before, but I just love what Sia's done, and I've learned a couple of her songs, and I think she would be intriguing to sing with. But I would also like to make a full record, which I've never done, with Forrester and Eddie Perfect. We've got 3 tracks. We've got 3 tracks that we've got that we just did as friends, sort of making stuff up. And I've always wanted to have a process where we could spend a month, or we could probably get it done in 2 weeks, to be honest. But I think I'd love to have a process where we could just really sit around and smoke a joint, and Forry can have a cup of coffee, because Forry doesn't smoke a joint. I don't know. Maybe he does. But I'd love to do that. And so that's something something will probably happen when we're a bit older and we've got a bit more time. Yeah,
totally. I'll just rapid fire a couple, and then I can let you go. Is there anything else?
Is this marry, kill, fuck? Is this that game?
I know that we mentioned right at the start that you're doing this AFL umpiring. Is there anything else that's non-musical that helps keep your head together? Obviously, there's the politics as well. Your life is fairly out there, so people are probably aware of the politics and the AFL. But
I mean, I'm a to any single parents out there, or I should say, even if you're not a single parent, anyone that is unable to spend as much time as they would like with their child.
Yep.
I was up seeing Griffin in the Northern Rivers area of New South Wales last week, and so I take my time with Griffin very seriously, and it really decompresses me, and it also reminds me, which it's a very simple, a very basic thing, but it reminds me that there is someone out there who thinks that I am fantastic, and that thinks that I am the funniest and the brightest. Although, to be fair, he's getting a bit older now, and he doesn't think I'm as funny as he used to. The eye rolls have begun, Glenn. Yep. But that's something that really levels me out and gets me back to that core element of just being a good dad, just making the ham sandwich and making sure that you're there with the cuddles and the kisses and the stern advice when you needs it. That's something that's really grounding, because when you've got everything, life moves pretty fast in the music business, and you're constantly getting feedback, particularly in the modern world, about how you've gone, even to the point where people write reviews and put them in newspapers that aren't flattering. That can, over 20 years, I've certainly been through points where I've felt like, what is the point of this, and why am I, when it just becomes hard. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that everyone has moments where it's hard. And so I think for me, it's really family and friends, my partner and fiance, Ashley, and my son, my mum. And that's, and I know it's trite and it's a cliche, but I mean, cliches are true for a reason. And, the older I get, the more I really appreciate how, I guess, the people that know me and the people that love you unconditionally. Yeah. It's important. It's okay to just want to be in that.
Yeah. Totally.
It's okay to just get into that womb and just go, yeah, man, I'm special. I am loved, because it's a pretty dark and brutal world out there, particularly at the moment. And there's a lot of ability for some really negative and dark stuff to be telegraphed, and in some cases to be put into a position where it's actually influencing things. So I think in a way, love is key, and you need to find that. So wherever you can get it, and hold on to it if you can find it, because there's people out there that have no one. So if you have someone, even if it's one person, then look after them, because don't take that stuff for granted.
Yeah. There's something very pure about the love between parents and children that but my daughter's almost 4 now, and it's that sort of, it is almost the most pure expression of love there is. It's unconditional,
well, there's also a little bit of ego in it. It's like, you look like me, you talk like me, you're like a little me. I'm going to teach you about, this is the truth. Here's the truth. And they parrot it back at you, and you're like, yeah, that's right. You're cute and you're gorgeous and you speak the truth. So it's a beautiful way we're programmed to make sure that this species continues. And I love being a part of that. And I wouldn't mind adding one more. I'd like to have another child, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any books, podcasts, or YouTube channels that you consume regularly? Primarily from
I'll give you all three. I'll give you all three. An amazing podcast is called Dark Topic that I've been getting into. It's the production is absolutely fantastic on it, and the way that the host takes you through stuff, but beware, it is not for the faint-hearted. It deals with things from serial killing, pedophile rings, the darkest parts of humanity, and it goes there. But the poetry with which it's written is refreshing. So it's not like what we're doing now. It's actually quite structured and quite poetic. Then there's a show called Some More News with a guy called Cody, that's a YouTube channel, and he does like the mad as hell kind of news anchor, the news anchor with the hair, and he can't believe how terrible things are getting. But he does some amazing research, and look, and isn't quite as militant revolutionary as I am. He actually seems to sit a little further to the right, but his research and his attitudes are very compassionate and very humanitarian, and I think he's also very funny, and I like that. You're getting the news, but you're also getting a laugh. And then as far as books go, I was very lucky to get 40 books for my 40th birthday from my fiance. And I'd recommend Dark Emu to anyone. It's a great way to catch up on what's been happening, which is by Bruce Pascoe, which is a great story about some real history of Aboriginal people in this country. But where do you stop? The Spook Next to the Door is another great book, a novel that I'm reading. I can't remember who wrote it. And I'm also reading a book at the moment called Pundemonium, which is a history of puns and punning and how it works. Because I am one of those people who, I'm very surprised I've gotten through this conversation without making a pun, but I love puns, and it goes into the history of people complaining about puns and how, what's interesting is you don't really think about it, but of course, if you're speaking in Russian people have puns, Chinese people have puns. Every linguistic culture takes their versions of words that sound the same and mashes them up to have a bit of fun. The reason I love puns, and one of the reasons I love this book, is because it affirms my feelings about it, is it's mental play, and it's word play, and it's very important if you have children. The dad joke, so to speak, is a very, very important part of developing your linguistic ability, of being flexible in how you learn, and also in being able to communicate and experience things like humor, experience things like absurdity, experience things like connection, the way networks work, both neural and linguistic. So all that's proven in this book. So next time you tell a pun and someone groans, it's because they're not as smart as you.
But,
sorry, man, that's just science.
But it's true though. Like, how absurd is "I'm hungry"? Hi, hungry. I'm Dad. That's the classic dad joke, and it's actually totally it's very Monty Python-esque. Lastly, and most importantly, your favorite riff.
Favorite riff of all time.
No, it's a tough one.
I can have a few. Yeah. Favorite riff. I mean, it's really hard to go past Bomb Track.
Yep.
Bomb Track's isn't it? Yep, that's pretty solid. It's not only a great riff, but it also is a musical language for incitement, for the front line of revolutionary politics. It sounds like the thing it's saying, which I love. I love the little guitar lick at the start of Carolina in My Mind by James Taylor. I do love it. And then, I mean, Enter Sandman.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. So, but I mean, that's. I mean, you could go on and on. I mean, riffs are amazing, and I remember me and Forrester when we were very, very younger men. We were 20, 21, 22. We used to just say it's all about the riffage. Yep. It's all about the riffage. You can be any band you want, but you got to have the riffs. I think we've slightly mellowed on that as we got older, but it's I think those three I like. I don't know if I come up with any others. I'll comment on when you post this. I'll comment on it.
Okay. I remember. I think it was Forrester that came up with the idea that new metal could be summed up by "Here comes the big riff. Here comes the big riff. Here comes the big riff. Here comes the big riff. This is the big riff. This is the big riff. This is the big riff."
Yeah. Well, I've actually got my car is a runaround 2001, and it's a great car, but it's it ain't a Lamborghini. So of course it doesn't have a Bluetooth or a auxiliary input. Even the stereo is the 2001 CD player with the radio. I'm sure it was state of the art at the time, but I started going to op shops. I just picked up another 20 CDs today from the op shop that I actually volunteer at. Yeah. I started going to op shops, and I've got this 200 CD case which sits in my car, and one of the CD, and every time I've got everything from Michael Bolton to Korn to Mavis Staples to Leadbelly, Fats Domino, the Eurythmics, Aqua, all these CDs where I look at them and go, that's fun. And what I'm using it for is, well, first of all, so I've got music in my car if I don't want to listen to radio because it can get a bit much. But it's also amazing to listen. The reason these CDs exist in op shops is because they sold so many copies of them, most of them, that people then got rid of them. But you're seeing things like Jagged Little Pill comes up all the time, a lot of Matchbox 20, Metallica, all the big sellers are there. And so you're getting albums that are, and you're listening to them in WAV format, not MP3 format, in a car, moving, which is the only way to listen to music, or the best way. And I'm loving having this finite resource in the age of streaming where water is like tap music. So music is like tap water. Yeah. I'm loving having this finite resource that I can keep adding to. But I'm finding that going back to albums like Follow the Leader, going back to Ministry, all these bands I haven't listened to in a long time because same thing I said, you think you're in control, right? But here comes the universe to go, here's an Aqua CD. So I'll put the Aqua CD on, I'll listen to Barbie Girl, and I think to myself, why? And then you actually listen to it and you go, there's a reason this song is so successful. It doesn't mean I'm going to go back and listen to it, you know, when I'm experimenting with psychedelic drugs. I'm not going to listen to Barbie Girl, but there is something you can get out of it. And so I'm really enjoying that process of going back to the hits as other people saw them, but also the beginnings of a lot of things with Lead Belly, Howlin' Wolf, Fats Domino. Because as a rock and roller, it is very important to every 6 months just go back and just listen to the blues. Just go back and listen to what was happening in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Then you can stop, because that's when Elvis came in, and that's when the white people took over. And that's all good. I'm Gunjin Tamara on my mum's side. You know, I'm an Aboriginal person, but I'm also an English and Welsh person. And I think that it's good to go back and listen to blues if you're in rock and roll, because it is the beginning. Like, I listened to this Fats Domino record the other day that I got from the op shop. Man, it is so rock and roll. It is so rock. Like, it's dangerous. Like, you can hear the way he was playing, then you contextualize it with when it was, and it was on the edge. Like Chuck Berry, that shit is on the edge, man. That is like so out there. Even today, when you listen to what he was doing, you can just immerse yourself. So I'm a big fan of maybe just listening to something that, because, you know, the Chuck Berry stuff, of course, I'm never going to produce anything that sounds like that, because it's 2020. I have 20 mics. I have Pro Tools. Why would I do that? But when you're listening to the song, when you're listening to what makes the song tick, and in many ways, what the artist and their engineers and all those super smart people they were collaborating with at the time were able to get out of the recording technology at the time, particularly when you listen to bands like the Beach Boys, who were pushing the envelope. They were creating, with a song like Good Vibrations, took 8 months to record in 4 different studios around the world. They had to invent equipment to finish that song. And you listen to it now, and it sounds like a demo of what you would be able to produce in your bedroom. But you contextualize it. It's, apart from the fact it's a great song and you can play it on acoustic guitar and it still works. But it's very interesting to listen to, just because you can hear that intensity in it. You can hear that striving. And I love going back to that stuff, you know.
All right, thanks so much, Zeke. What are you up to in the future? What do you got coming up? Do you want to talk?
I've got lots coming up. I'm in the process. I'm in the process of doing a fundraiser for Lifeline on a song called "Thriving," a song for Lifeline. I'd encourage people to go to EzekielOx.bandcamp.com, and you can download that track for $10 minimum, or you can pay more. That money 100% goes to Lifeline, they help people in crisis who are feeling suicidal, and that's something that's very close to my heart. I've lost people in my life to those things, so please call Lifeline if you're struggling, or someone else. But we're raising money for them, and that's been amazing. It's got Eddie Perfect on it. It's got Zanny Kolak on it. It's got Tim McCallum on it. It's got Jolly and James did the artwork. Dane from Exo Sucker Punch plays drums on it. It's an amazing production. It sounds great. Yep. And then I'm going to have to say, I'm going to have to let people wait with bated breath, because I'm launching 3 things on December 1st, which I think are going to be amazing. I'm moving back into the live rock and roll experience, but I'm also moving into more live streaming, which is going to be great. And there's a Christmas surprise coming up for everyone. But in the meantime, if people want to know what I'm doing, the best thing to do is to go to EzekielOx.com/promotion, or you can just go to EzekielOx.com. When you land on either of those pages, you're going to go to there's going to be a mailing list sign up. Just give me an email. Some months I don't send an email. Some months I send 3. It is not spam. It is always relating to something that is happening. New merchandise offers, new gig offers, whatever it is. You do get discounts. You do get material that other people don't. But it's very important that I can communicate with you peer to peer. I'm trying to build that thing. So if you want to know more about what I'm doing, just go to EzekielOx.com. Give me your email and I'll tell you what I'm doing. So that's the easiest way.
Great. Thanks so much for this today, Zeke. It's been great to chat to you, mate.
It's my pleasure, Glenn, and thank you for the initiative. It's a great thing to do, to ask artists. I hope that the listeners are getting plenty out of it, and I imagine they would be. This has been a great chat, and it's a pleasure. And fingers crossed, I can convince you to do that thing that we were talking about before. But if I can't, you're your own man. and that's fine. I'm not going to haul you over the coals for it, Glenn. You're a legend. Thank you so much for your time, and to all the listeners out there, it's been great talking to you. And I encourage you to reach out to me if you need any more. If you want any answers, if you want a conversation a bit further about what I've been talking about, then please feel free to shoot me a message somewhere, and I'll try to answer it in time.